Signalis, the game I haven't been able to stop thinking about from the moment I started it. Created by Rose Engine, a two-person indie team from Germany. It's a survival horror that's just oozing atmosphere and aesthetics. This game is peak sci-fi, and I don't really know anyone else who's played it, so I wanted to make this video to get the message out there. This game's rad as hell. It's artistic, full of story, and is a total roller coaster ride from start to finish. And honestly, I think seeing really anything about this game will spoil some of the experience for you. So if you're willing to take a risk and just try out something cool, go buy the game. You won't regret it. Probably. For some extra encouragement though, it's only $20 and has overwhelmingly positive reviews. But if you want to know more about it first, or just don't care about spoilers, then keep watching. Alright, let's get into things. Now, I should start off by saying that I'm not the biggest fan of survival horror games. My resource management is absolutely horrible. I'm a notorious item hoarder, and I really can't seem to get myself to just spend resources. Either that, or I have the opposite problem where I carelessly use up everything and I'm stuck with Jack for most of the game. But despite my personal problems with the genre, Signalis just drew me in. And even though I struggled through the game, I just couldn't put it down. Part of that is that I feel like this game is just designed to be memorable. The standout for me is the main menu, especially the music. The 3-note oddity is such an iconic sound, and it was such a great idea on the developer's part to use it as the first thing you hear when you boot up the game. It's eerie, haunting, and for me at least, whenever I hear it in the real world, it makes me think of the game. Speaking of, let's dive into what you actually do in Signalis. You play as Elster, a replica, basically an android, who wakes up alone on a crashed ship. All you have to go off of is a photograph of a woman, and all you know is that you want to find her. After solving a simple puzzle, you get to leave the ship, crawl into a creepy hole in the ground, and get one of the coolest intros for a game I've ever seen. After that, you end up in an underground facility and are let loose to search for the woman in the photo. From there, if you've played other survival horror games, you know the drill. Wander around creepy environments, find items, manage your inventory, solve puzzles, read lots of notes, and deal with monsters. In this case, the monsters are other replicas that have been infected with some mystery virus that's been going around the facility. Combat is pretty straightforward. You aim your gun, a reticle locks onto the monster, and gets smaller the longer you lock on. The smaller the square, the more damage you do. Once they get on the ground, you can either shoot them to finish them off, or run over and stomp on them to save a bullet. There's a variety of guns and some melee weapons, so you get a good amount of choice when it comes to combat encounters. The real fun part, though, is that when you kill an enemy, they don't disappear. They crumple to the ground and just lay there. Even when you leave a room and come back later, there they are, right where you left them. That is because enemies can and will eventually come back to life. It creates this sense of dread whenever you're backtracking through rooms. Every time you step near a body, you're just waiting for them to stand back up. It's so ominous, I love it. Later on in the game, you get a rare resource that lets you burn the bodies to permanently kill them, but I never really used those because, like I said, resource hoarding is my kryptonite. Oh, there's one enemy type in particular I have to talk about. They're super unique though, and I wouldn't want to ruin the first encounter with them, so if you want to skip this little segment, just use the timecode on the screen. If you're still here, then these are the Colibris. Your first encounter with one comes out of nowhere, and it's super cool. You're just wandering around, minding your own business, when you walk into an unassuming room and just... You have to use your radio to kill them by tuning into the right frequency enough times. Oh, that's another thing I should probably mention. You have a radio in this game. It's usually used for puzzles, tune into this frequency to get a code, this one to activate something, stuff like that. Speaking of puzzles, I really love the puzzles in this game. Most of them are pretty simple in concept, but you always feel like a genius when you solve them. I won't spoil any of them here, just because solving them yourself is just that satisfying. The notes you read are also fun to come across. Some have puzzle hints, others have world building or story stuff, and some just have ominous scrawling all over them. Most of the game's story is drip-fed to you through the notes, so definitely read any that you come across. This game also uses safe rooms, specific enemy-free rooms where you can get your bearings, store items, and save with the most friendly-looking computer I've ever seen. You only have 6 inventory slots in this game, with the in-game reason being that personal property is a privilege, so 6 items is the limit. Item storage becomes essential, and you'll definitely find yourself making a lot of trips to the safe room to swap out your items. Really quickly, I should mention the game's soundtrack as well. It's great, from the horrifying industrial noise that plays during enemy encounters, to the melancholy ambiance. This game's OST is just packed with really well-written pieces. Every song I've used in the background of this video is from the OST, so that should give you an idea of the kind of sound the game has. Another quick note, this game's really nice to look at if you couldn't already tell. The PS1-esque visuals are executed phenomenally here, and the pixel art in the cutscenes is absolutely gorgeous. This game has so much personality, from the flashing imagery or its specific unnerving visuals. It's just an artistic treat from start to end. Alright, that basically wraps up my thoughts on gameplay, so I think it's time I delve into this game's story. Before I really get into things, I want to just throw out a disclaimer that I have basically no idea what I'm talking about. This game is complicated, and I'm sure most of the story completely flew over my head. So if anything I say is just totally wrong, or I'm forgetting super important information, then I'm sorry. I'm just some guy who likes video games and wants to talk about how cool they are. That aside, the story, or what I can gather from it, is super thought-provoking and just really cool in general. So, Elster is a replica, and all types of replicas have their own functions and personalities. Each enemy type in the game is based off of a different replica unit, and it's really unnerving reading about each type of replica and seeing how their personalities correspond to enemy behaviors. It's humanizing and pretty sad at the same time. Their names are basically how you would read their model types, like for example, Elster is an LSTR unit, or the game's antagonist Adler is an ADLR unit. They all do work for this totalitarian regime, and their main goal is to find new planets to colonize. Replicas also work with Gestalts, who, from what I can tell, are basically clones of specific people from Earth. I think replicas are also based off of specific people, but the difference is that replicas have a coded personality and are more robotic, while Gestalts have unique personalities. Anyways, Elster's looking for her Gestalt partner that she fell in love with, Ariane. The two of them are alone on the ship for who knows how long, so they have a very strong relationship with one another. You made a promise to her, and you need to make sure you fulfill it. Throughout the game, you get flashbacks and these surreal first-person dream sequences that help flesh out their relationship and really get you to care about them. Along Elster's journey through the facility, she meets Issa, a Gestalt who's also searching for someone within the facility. You have a few encounters with her throughout the game, and being that she's one of the only non-infected people you run into, it's always comforting knowing that there's someone else out there fighting just like you are. And then there's Adler. This is where I'm going to start getting into mega spoilers for the rest of the video, so seriously, if anything I've said sounds interesting to you, play Signalis. It's really a one-of-a-kind experience. Still here? Alright, cool. I'm a sucker for good antagonists, and Adler definitely fits that profile. When you first meet him, he just kinda seems like some asshole shoving you down an elevator shaft for no reason, but it's when you find out about the cycles that he starts to make more sense. Every time Elster dies, the cycle restarts. Each attempt to reach Ariane is a different cycle. Adler is the only person, along with you, the player, who's conscious of these cycles, since it wipes everyone's memories for whatever reason. You find that out by reading his diary. He starts to feel like he's losing his mind since all of his entries are dated with the same date, and he never remembers writing said entries. Adler is in charge of the facility that the game takes place in, and since each cycle deteriorates the facility more and more, he decides that Elster needs to be stopped. The pile of Elsters at the bottom of the elevator shaft is just you from previous cycles. The only reason you survived the fall in the first place is that Adler's pushed you so many times that enough bodies piled up to break your fall. The thing that makes him really interesting to me, though, is that he's trying to cure his love interest/boss, Falk, who's basically like a god to the other replicas. The cycles also seem to be perpetuating the virus in the facility, which Falk fell victim to. Elster and Adler are just two people in a horrible situation trying to save the ones they love, and that dichotomy between them is what makes their dynamic so interesting. Now let's talk about the later stages of the game, because wow, this game gets pretty wacko closer to the end. After fighting your way through the deepest parts of the facility, you finally reach the ship that Arion's holed up in. The area leading up to it is littered with Elster bodies. You try to open the ship's hatch, but you just can't. And then the game just ends. Roll credits. It's super unsatisfying, but that's actually a fake-out ending. If you hit New Game on the main menu again, then it starts you out with more flashbacks of Elster and Arion, and then it puts you in a more decrepit version of the ship you originally started the game in. You find the body of a past Elster, and, well, you do what needs to be done. From there, you make your way back into the facility, and everything is completely run down now. After a few rooms, you get access to the game's real final area. This is where the decay caused by the cycles really shows itself. Enemies litter every room, areas will suddenly seal themselves off with pulsing walls of meat. It's just a complete madhouse. This is also where you cross paths with Issa for the last time. She couldn't find who she was looking for, and so she just melts. Not entirely sure what happened here, but definitely makes me feel bad. Issa's death was a clear indicator that your journey was coming to an end. She couldn't reach her goal, but will you be able to reach yours? After more fighting and puzzle solving, you eventually reach Falk, and find out that her conscience has basically fused with Elster's, and she wants to reach Arion just as much as you. She's completely overtaken by the virus and will do everything she can to kill you. This begins the final boss. The fight against Falk is long and brutal, with a whopping 6 phases to deal with, groups of enemies to fight, and large psychic attacks that you need to dodge. It's a very difficult fight, especially with how clunky this game's combat is, but it is still doable. After beating her and dealing with Adler in a cutscene, you reach Arion's ship again and get one of 3 endings. The requirements for each ending are actually really interesting because they're not determined by specific items like most games are. Instead, Signalis studies how you play the game and gives you an ending based off of your playstyle. How long between each save did you go? How often was your health low? How many enemies did you kill? How long did it take for you to beat the game? That's the kind of stuff it checks for. Now, I got the promise ending on my first playthrough, so that's the one I'm going to be talking about, but honestly, they're all equally tragic. In the promise ending, Elster makes her way into Arion's ship, and finds all these notes by Arion detailing her time and space. It's honestly super haunting reading them, seeing just how tortured she felt being stuck on this ship for well over 5,000 cycles. Elster finds Arion sitting in a room full of blood in the very back of the ship, and you finally fulfill your promise to her, ending the cycles once and for all. It's honestly one of the most heartbreaking endings I've ever seen. The intimacy and romance between these two is such a stark contrast to the hell that the rest of the game depicted, and to see it end like this, well, it's just soul-crushing. There's so much more about this game that I want to talk about, but I really can't find the right words for them. I think if you played the game, you get what I'm talking about. It's beautiful, it's tragic, and it's one of the best indie games I've ever played. Thanks for lending an ear to my rambling, and thank you for watching.